Not far from the Palais Royal, in the Rue Saint-Honoré, is the sign of La Bonne Foy, a small establishment, half cafe and half shop, extensively patronized by the people of the neighborhood. It was in the smoking room of this modest café that Prosper, the day after his release, awaited M. Vergeret, who had promised to meet him at 4 o'clock. The clock struck 4. M. Vergeret, who was punctuality itself, appeared. He was more red-faced and self-satisfied, if possible, than the day before. As soon as the servant had left the room to obey his orders, he said to Prosper, "Well, are our commissions executed?" "Yes, monsieur." "Have you seen the costumer?" "I gave him your letter, and everything you ordered will be sent to the Archangel tomorrow." "Very good, you have not lost time, neither have I. I have good news for you. The Bonne Foy is almost deserted at 4 o'clock. The hour for coffee is past, and the hour for absinthe has not yet come." M. Vergeret and Prosper could talk at their ease without fear of being overheard by gossiping neighbors. M. Vergeret drew forth his memorandum book, the precious diary which, like the enchanted book in the fairy tale, had an answer for every question. "While awaiting our emissaries whom I appointed to meet here, let us devote a little time to M. de Lagers." At this name Prosper did not protest, as he had done the night previous. Like those imperceptible insects which, having once penetrated the root of a tree, devour it in a single night, suspicion, when it invades our mind, soon develops itself, and destroys our firmest beliefs. The visit of Lagers, and Gypsy's torn letter, had filled Prosper with suspicions which had grown stronger and more settled as time passed. "Do you know, my dear friend," said M. Vergeret, "what part of France this devoted friend of yours comes from?" "He was born at Saint Remy, which is also Madame Fauble's native town." "Are you certain of that?" "Oh, perfectly so, monsieur. He has not only often told me so, but I have heard him tell M. Fauble, and he would talk to Madame Fauble by the hour about his mother, who was cousin to Madame Fauble, and dearly beloved by her." "Then you think there is no possible mistake or falsehood about this part of his story?" "None in the least, monsieur." "Well, things are assuming a queer look." And he began to whistle between his teeth, which, with M. Vergeret, was a sign of intense inward satisfaction. "What seems so, monsieur?" inquired Prosper. "What has just happened, what I have been tracing. Parbleu," he exclaimed, imitating the manner of a showman at a fair, "here is a lovely town, called Saint Remy, 6,000 inhabitants, charming boulevards on the site of the old fortifications, handsome hotel, numerous fountains, large charcoal market, silk factories, famous hospital, and so on." Prosper was on thorns. "Please be so good, monsieur, as to explain what you—" "It also contains," continued M. Vergeret, "a Roman triumphal arch, which is of unparalleled beauty, and a Greek mausoleum, but no Lagers. Saint Remy is the native town of Nostradamus, but not of your friend. Yet I have proofs." "Naturally. But proofs can be fabricated, relatives can be improvised. Your evidence is open to suspicion. My proofs are undeniable, perfectly authenticated. While you were pining in prison, I was preparing my batteries and collecting munition to open fire. I wrote to Saint Remy, and received answers to my questions." "Will you let me know what they were?" "Have patience," said M. Vergeret as he turned over the leaves of his memoranda. "Ah, here is number 1. Bow respectfully to it, 'tis official." He then read: Lagers. Very old family, originally from Mail Lane, settled at Saint Remy about a century ago. I told you so, cried Prosper. Pray allow me to finish, said M. Vergeret. The last of the Lagers, Jules René Henry, bearing without warrant the title of Count, married in 1829 Emile Rosalie Clarice Fontanet, of Tarascon, died December 1848, leaving no male heir, but left 2 daughters. The registers make no mention of any person in the district bearing the name of Lagers. Now what do you think of this information? Queried the fat man with a triumphant smile. Prosper looked amazed. But why did M. Fauvel treat Raoul as his nephew? Ah, you mean as his wife's nephew. Let us examine note number 2. It is not official, but it throws a valuable light upon the 20,000 livres income of your friend. Jules René Henri de Lagers, last of his name, died at Saint Remy on the 29th of December, 1848, in a state of great poverty. He at one time was possessed of a moderate fortune, but invested it in a silkworm nursery, and lost it all. He had no son, but left 2 daughters, one of whom is a teacher at Aix, and the other married a retail merchant at Orgon. His widow, who lives at Montagnet, is supported entirely by one of her relatives, the wife of a rich banker in Paris. No person of the name of Lagers lives in the district of Alls. That is all, said M. Vergeret. Don't you think it enough? Really, monsieur, I don't know whether I am awake or dreaming. You will be awake after a while. Now I wish to remark one thing. Some people may assert that the widow Lagers had a child born after her husband's death. This objection has been destroyed by the age of your friend. Raoul is 24, and M. de Lagers has not been dead 20 years. But, said Prosper thoughtfully, who can Raoul be? I don't know. The fact is, I am more perplexed to find out who he is, than to know whom he is not. There is one man who could give us all the information we seek, but he will take good care to keep his mouth shut. You mean M. de Clameron? Him, and no one else. I have always felt the most inexplicable aversion toward him. Ah, if we could only get his account in addition to what you already have. I have been furnished with a few notes concerning the Clameron family by your father, who knew them well. They are brief, but I expect more. What did my father tell you? Nothing favorable, you may be sure. I will read you the synopsis of this information. Louis de Clameron was born at the Château de Clameron, near Tarascon. He had an elder brother named Gaston, who, in consequence of an affray in which he had the misfortune to kill one man and badly wound another, was compelled to fly the country in 1842. Gaston was an honest, noble youth, universally beloved. Louis, on the contrary, was a wicked, despicable fellow, detested by all who knew him. Upon the death of his father, Louis came to Paris, and in less than 2 years had squandered not only his own patrimony, but also the share of his exiled brother. Ruined and harassed by debt, Louis entered the army, but behaved so disgracefully that he was dismissed. After leaving the army we lose sight of him. All we can discover is, that he went to England, and thence to a German gambling resort, where he became notorious for his scandalous conduct. In 1865 we find him again at Paris. He was in great poverty, and his associates were among the most depraved classes. But he suddenly heard of the return of his brother Gaston to Paris. Gaston had made a fortune in Mexico, but being still a young man, and accustomed to a very active life, he purchased, near Orleans, an iron mill, intending to spend the remainder of his life in working at it. 6 months ago he died in the arms of his brother Louis. His death provided our de Clameron an immense fortune, and the title of Marquis. Then, said Prosper, From all this I judged that Emile de Clameren was very poor when I met him for the first time at M. Fauvel's? Evidently. And about that time Lagers arrived from the country? Precisely. And about a month after his appearance Madeleine suddenly banished me? Well, exclaimed M. Vergeret, I am glad you are beginning to understand the state of affairs. He was interrupted by the entrance of a stranger. The newcomer was a dandified-looking coachman, with elegant black whiskers, shining boots with fancy tops, buff breeches, and a yellow waistcoat with red and black stripes. After cautiously looking around the room, he walked straight up to the table where M. Vergeret sat. What is the news, Master Joseph Dubois? Said the stout man eagerly. Ah, patron, don't speak of it, answered the servant, things are getting warm. Prosper concentrated all his attention upon this superb domestic. He thought he recognized his face. He had certainly somewhere seen that retreating forehead in those little restless black eyes, but where and when he could not remember. Meanwhile, Master Joseph had taken a seat at a table adjoining the one occupied by M. Vergeret and Prosper, and, having called for some absinthe, was preparing it by holding the water aloft and slowly dropping it in the glass. Speak, said M. Vergeret. In the first place, patron, I must say that the position of valet and coachman to M. de Clameren is not a bed of roses. Go on, come to the point. You can complain tomorrow. Very good. Yesterday my master walked out at 2 o'clock. I, of course, followed him. Do you know where he went? The thing was as good as a farce. He went to the Archangel to keep the appointment made by Nina Gypsy. Well, make haste. They told him she was gone. Then? Ah! He was not at all pleased, I can tell you. He hurried back to the hotel where the other Hymns de Lagers awaited him. And, upon my soul, I have never heard so much swearing in my life. M. Raoul asked him what had happened to put him in such a bad humor. Nothing, replied my master, except that little devil has run off, and no one knows where she has slipped through our fingers. Then they both appeared to be vexed and uneasy. Lagers asked if she knew anything serious. She knows nothing but what I told you, replied Clameren, but this nothing, falling in the ear of a man with any suspicions, will be more than enough to work on. M. Vergeret smiled like a man who had his reasons for appreciating at their just value de Clameren's fears. Well, your master is not without sense, after all, don't you think he showed it by saying that? Yes, patron. Then Lagers exclaimed, if it is as serious as that, we must get rid of this little serpent. But my master shrugged his shoulders, and laughing loudly said, you talk like an idiot. When one is annoyed by a woman of this sort, one must take measures to get rid of her administratively. This idea seemed to amuse them both very much. I can understand their being entertained by it, said M. Vergeret. It is an excellent idea, but the misfortune is, it is too late to carry it out. The nothing which made Clameren uneasy has already fallen into a knowing ear. With breathless curiosity, Prosper listened to this report, every word of which seemed to throw light upon past events. Now, he thought, he understood the fragment of Gypsy's letter. He saw that this Raoul, in whom he had confided so deeply, was nothing more than a scoundrel. 1,000 little circumstances, unnoticed at the time, now recurred to his mind, and made him wonder how he could have been so blind so long. Master Joseph Dubois continued his report. Yesterday, after dinner, my master decked himself out like a bridegroom. I shaved him, curled his hair, and perfumed him with special care, after which I drove him to the Rue de Provence to call on Madame Fauvel. What, exclaimed Prosper, after the insulting language he used the day of the robbery, did he dare to visit the house? Yes, monsieur, he not only dared this, but he also stayed there until midnight, to my great discomfort, for I got as wet as a rat, waiting for him. How did he look when he came out? Asked M. Vergeret. Well, he certainly looked less pleased than when he went in. After putting away my carriage, and rubbing down my horses, I went to see if he wanted anything. I found the door locked, and he swore at me like a trooper, through the keyhole. And, to assist the digestion of this insult, Master Joseph here gulped down a glass of absinthe. Is that all? Questioned M. Vergeret. All that occurred yesterday, patron, but this morning my master rose late, still in a horrible bad humor. At noon Raoul arrived, also in a rage. They at once began to dispute, and such a row. Why, the most abandoned housebreakers and pickpockets would have blushed to hear such Billingsgate. At one time my master seized the other by the throat and shook him like a reed. But Raoul was too quick for him. He saved himself from strangulation by drawing out a sharp-pointed knife, the sight of which made my master drop him in a hurry, I can tell you. But what did they say? Ah, there is the rub, patron, said Joseph in a piteous tone. The scamps spoke English, so I could not understand them. But I am sure they were disputing about money. How do you know that? Because I learned at the exposition that the word argent means money in every language in Europe, and this word they constantly used in their conversation. M. Vergeret sat with knit brows, talking in an undertone to himself, and Prosper, who was watching him, wondered if he was trying to understand and construct the dispute by mere force of reflection. When they had done fighting, continued Joseph, the rascals began to talk in French again, but they only spoke of a fancy ball which is to be given by some banker. When Raoul was leaving, my master said, since this thing is inevitable, and it must take place today, you had better remain at home, at Vezinit, this evening. Raoul replied, of course. Night was approaching, and the smoking room was gradually filling with men who called for absinthe or bitters, and youths who perched themselves up on high stools and smoked their pipes. It is time to go, said M. Vergeret. Your master will want you, Joseph. Besides, here is someone come for me. I will see you tomorrow. The newcomer was no other than Cavallon, more troubled and frightened than ever. He looked uneasily around the room, as if he expected the whole police force to appear and carry him off to prison. He did not sit down at M. Vergeret's table, but stealthily gave his hand to Prosper, and, after assuring himself that no one was observing them, handed M. Vergeret a package, saying, "She found this in a cupboard." It was a handsomely bound prayer book. M. Vergeret rapidly turned over the leaves, and soon found the pages from which the words pasted on Prosper's letter had been cut. I had moral proofs, he said, handing the book to Prosper, but here is material proof sufficient in itself to save you. When Prosper looked at the book he turned pale as a ghost. He recognized this prayer book instantly. He had given it to Madeleine in exchange for the medal. He opened it, and on the flyleaf Madeleine had written, Souvenir of Notre Dame de Fourvières, January 17, 1866. This book belongs to Madeleine, he cried. M. Vergeret did not reply, but walked toward a young man dressed like a brewer, who had just entered the room. He glanced at the note which this person handed to him, and hastened back to the table, and said, in an agitated tone, I think we have got them now. Throwing a 5-franc piece on the table, and without saying a word to Cavallon, he seized Prosper's arm, and hurried from the room. What a fatality, he said, as he hastened along the street, we may miss them. We shall certainly reach the Saint-Lazare station too late for the Saint-Germain train. For heaven's sake, where are you going? Asked Prosper. Never mind, we can talk after we start. Hurry! Reaching Palais Royal Place, M. Vergeret stopped before one of the hacks belonging to the railway station, and examined the horses at a glance. How much for driving us to Vézenet? He asked of the driver. I don't know the road very well that way. The name of Vézenet was enough for Prosper. Well, said the driver, at this time of night, in such dreadful weather, it ought to be 25 francs. And how much more for driving very rapidly? Bless my soul! Why, monsieur, I leave that to your generosity, but if you put it at 35 francs. You shall have 100, interrupted M. Vergeret, if you overtake a carriage which has half an hour's start of us. Tonnerre de Brest, cried the delighted driver, jump in quick, we are losing time. And, whipping up his lean horses, he galloped them down the Rue de Valois at lightning speed.